The divorce papers arrived on my 32nd birthday. Not flowers, not chocolates, not even a card from my husband of 9 years. Just crisp legal documents served by a stone-faced process server who wished me a good day before walking away from the life I thought I controlled. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Evelyn Carter, and I used to believe I was smarter than everyone around me. I had it all figured out: the perfect marriage, the ideal career in human resources, and a best friend who worshipped the ground I walked on. What I didn't count on was my husband David being far more observant than I gave him credit for, or that my carefully constructed world of lies would crumble faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, when I still thought I was the victim in my own story. 3 months before those papers arrived, I was sitting in our suburban townhouse living room, watching David grade papers at the kitchen table. He looked older than his 35 years, his brown hair thinning at the temples, wire-rimmed glasses sliding down his nose as he bent over another stack of high school history tests. "Mom, why is Dad always sad?" 8-year-old Lily asked, climbing onto my lap with her favorite stuffed rabbit. I smoothed her dark hair, so much like mine. "Daddy's not sad, sweetheart. He's just tired from work." But even as I said it, I knew she was right. David had been different lately, quieter, more withdrawn. He used to laugh at my jokes, used to pull me close when we watched movies together. Now he sat on the opposite end of the couch, creating an invisible wall between us. "Can we have pancakes for dinner?" 5-year-old Thomas asked, bouncing into the room with his toy dinosaur. "Ask your father," I said, not looking up from my phone where I was scrolling through messages. David glanced over. "Sure, buddy. Let me finish these tests first." The normalcy of it all felt suffocating. This was my life. Suburban mediocrity with a man who took me for granted. David never surprised me anymore, never made me feel special or desired. He was reliable, sure, but reliability was boring. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake Morrison, my best friend since college. "Thinking about you today. Hope you're happy." I smiled, feeling that familiar flutter in my chest. Jake always knew exactly what to say. He was everything David wasn't: spontaneous, creative, passionate about his freelance graphic design work. Where David was predictable, Jake was exciting. "Who's texting?" David asked, not looking up from his papers. "Just work stuff," I lied smoothly. "Sarah from accounting has questions about the new hiring policies." David nodded absently, already back to his grading. "See? This was exactly what I meant. He didn't even care enough to be suspicious." Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, I found David in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with something in his hands. "What's that?" I asked, hanging up my work blazer. He held up a receipt. "Found this in your coat pocket. Dinner for 2 at Romano's downtown. When were you there?" My heart skipped, but I kept my expression neutral. "Oh, that. I took Sarah out for lunch last week. You know how she's been struggling since her divorce. I thought she could use some cheering up." David studied the receipt more carefully. "This is dated for last Thursday. You said you were working late that night." "I was working late. We grabbed a quick bite afterward." The lie came so easily. "David, why are you interrogating me over a dinner receipt?" He folded the paper slowly. "I'm not interrogating you. We never go out anymore. I can't remember the last time we had dinner somewhere nice." There it was, the guilt trip, classic David making everything about what he wasn't getting instead of appreciating what he had. "Maybe if you ever suggested it instead of just grading papers every night," I snapped. "I'm not going to beg you to take me out." David's face fell. "You're right. I'm sorry. I've been distracted with the new curriculum requirements." I felt a tiny pang of guilt, but pushed it away. This was exactly the problem. David was always apologizing, always backing down. Where was the fight, the passion? Jake would never let me walk all over him like this. I'm going to take a shower, I said, grabbing my pajamas. In the bathroom, I locked the door and pulled out my phone. Jake had sent another message. Can't stop thinking about our conversation yesterday. You deserve so much more than what you're getting. I typed back quickly. Not now. David's being suspicious about stupid things. Maybe it's time to tell him the truth. I stared at the message, my pulse racing. The truth? That I'd been meeting Jake for months now, that our friendship had slowly evolved into something deeper and more complicated, that I looked forward to his texts more than conversations with my own husband. There's nothing to tell, I typed back. We're just friends. But even as I sent it, I knew it wasn't entirely true anymore. The next week I met Jake at our usual cafe downtown, a cozy little place called The Daily Grind, where the baristas knew our orders by heart. I'd told David I had a work lunch with potential vendors, another small lie in an increasingly tangled web. Jake was already there when I arrived, sitting in our corner booth with 2 lattes, and that smile that always made my stomach flip. At 33, he still had the same boyish charm that had attracted me in college, before I'd met David, before I'd chosen the safe, responsible path. You look stressed, he said as I slid into the booth across from him. David's being weird lately, asking questions, going through my things. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. I think he suspects something. Suspects what exactly? Jake leaned forward, his green eyes intense. We're not doing anything wrong, Evelyn. But we were, weren't we? Maybe not physically, but emotionally. I'd been sharing things with Jake that I should have been sharing with my husband. My dreams, my frustrations, my deepest fears about being trapped in a life that felt too small. I know that, I said, but you know how David is. He overthinks everything. Jake reached across the table and covered my hand with his. The touch sent electricity up my arm. Maybe he has reason to overthink. I pulled my hand back. Jake, don't. Don't what? Don't tell you that I've been in love with you for 15 years. Don't tell you that I think about you every single day. My heart hammered against my ribs. You can't say things like that. Why not? Because you're married to a man who doesn't appreciate you? Because you've settled for a life that makes you miserable? I'm not miserable, I protested, but the words sounded hollow even to me. Jake laughed bitterly. Come on, Evelyn. I've known you since we were 18. You used to have dreams, remember? You wanted to travel, to write, to do something meaningful with your life. Now you're stuck in suburban hell with a man who treats you like a roommate. David's a good man, I said weakly. Good isn't enough. You deserve passion, excitement, someone who sees how incredible you are. Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. You deserve to be loved the way I love you. The words hung between us like a bridge I could either cross or burn down. Part of me wanted to reach for his hand again, to let myself fall into the fantasy he was offering. But the rational part of my brain, the part that remembered my children's faces, held me back. We can't, I said finally. I won't risk our friendship for something that might not work out. Jake's face crumpled. Friendship? Is that really all this is to you? It has to be. He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. What if I said I was willing to wait? What if I said I'd wait forever, if there was even a chance? Don't do that to yourself, I whispered. Don't put your life on hold for me. But even as I said it, part of me thrilled at the idea that someone loved me that much, that someone thought I was worth waiting for. We sat in silence until Jake finally spoke again. I should probably go. Jake, please, don't let this ruin what we have. He stood up, leaving a 20 on the table. What we have is killing me, Evelyn. But I can't seem to stay away from you either. After he left, I sat alone in the cafe for another hour, staring at my phone. I had 17 missed calls from work and 3 texts from David asking when I'd be home. The real world was calling, demanding I return to my responsibilities. But all I could think about was the look in Jake's eyes when he'd said he loved me. That evening, David was helping Thomas with homework when I walked in. "How was your vendor lunch?" he asked without looking up. "Fine. Boring, actually. Just going over contract terms and pricing." David nodded, but I caught him glancing at me with that same suspicious look from the other night. "Mom," Lily ran over and hugged my legs. "Dad said we can get pizza for dinner." "That sounds perfect," I said, ruffling her hair. This was my real life. Pizza dinners and homework help and bedtime stories. Not stolen moments in cafes with men who claimed to love me. So why did I feel like I was suffocating? Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I found David in his study, working on lesson plans. "You know you can talk to me, right?" he said suddenly. "If something's bothering you, if you're unhappy about something." I froze in the doorway. "What do you mean?" "You've seemed distant lately, distracted. I just want you to know that I'm here if you need to talk." For a moment, I considered telling him everything. About Jake, about my feelings of being trapped, about how I sometimes lay awake at night, wondering what my life would have been like if I'd made different choices. Instead, I said, "I'm fine, David. Just work stress." He nodded, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. "Okay, but the offer stands." As I walked back to our bedroom, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. I looked like the same woman I'd always been. Shoulder-length dark hair, brown eyes, the kind of face that was pretty but not stunning. Ordinary, but Jake made me feel extraordinary. And maybe that was worth more than I'd been willing to admit. 2 weeks later, we were hosting Sunday dinner for both families, a monthly tradition that had become more obligation than pleasure. David's mother Helen was in the kitchen, helping me prepare the roast while making pointed comments about how thin I'd gotten. "Are you eating enough, dear?" she asked, her grey eyes studying me with concern. "You look tired." "I'm fine, Helen. Just busy with work." David's brother Gary arrived with his wife and kids, filling the house with noise and laughter. My own mother showed up 20 minutes late, as usual, full of apologies and complaints about traffic. "Where's Sadie?" I asked, noticing my sister hadn't arrived yet. "She said she might be late," Mom replied, but something in her tone suggested there was more to it. We were all seated around the dining room table when Gary, never one to read a room, decided to bring up Jake. "So when do we get to meet this famous best friend of yours, Evelyn?" "Jake, right? David's always mentioning how much time you two spend together." I nearly choked on my wine. "He's just a friend from college. You'd find him boring." "Boring?" Gary laughed. "David says the guy calls you more than your own mother does." Helen shot Gary a warning look, but the damage was done. Everyone was looking at me now, waiting for an explanation. "Jake's going through a rough patch," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "His father passed away recently, and he doesn't have much family. I'm just being supportive." It was a lie. Jake's father was alive and well, living in Florida, but it was the first thing that came to mind. "That's sweet of you," Helen said carefully, "though I hope he's not becoming too dependent on your friendship." "What's that supposed to mean?" I snapped, more defensively than I'd intended. David reached for my hand under the table. "Mom just means that some people can become too reliant on others during difficult times." "I can handle my own friendships, thank you very much." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Lily looked between the adults with wide, confused eyes. "Why is everyone being weird?" she asked. "Nobody's being weird, sweetheart," David said gently. "We're just talking." But Gary, apparently oblivious to the tension he'd created, kept going. "I just think it's interesting, you know. Most married women don't have such close male friends, especially ones who text them at all hours." "Gary," his wife warned. "What?" "I'm just saying, if my wife had some guy calling her every day, I'd want to know what they were talking about." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Maybe your wife doesn't tell you everything because you're judgmental and controlling." "Evelyn," David said sharply, "that's enough." "No, it's not enough. I'm tired of being questioned about every friendship, every phone call, every minute I spend outside this house. I'm a grown woman, not a prisoner. Helen cleared her throat. Perhaps we should change the subject. But I was on a roll now, all my frustration and guilt pouring out in the wrong direction. You know what the real problem is? David's so boring that the idea of me having an interesting conversation with someone else threatens him. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. David's face went white, then red. Interesting, he said quietly. Is that what you call it? I call it having a friend who actually cares about my thoughts and feelings. The way I don't? I realized I'd gone too far, but pride kept me from backing down. You said it, not me. David stood up slowly, folding his napkin with deliberate care. I think I need some air. He walked out of the dining room, leaving me standing there with 2 confused children and 4 adults staring at me like I'd just committed murder. Well, Gary said after a moment, this is awkward. Helen stood up and began clearing plates with sharp, efficient movements. Children, why don't you go play in the living room? After Lily and Thomas left, she turned to me with disappointment written all over her face. I don't know what's gotten into you, Evelyn, but that man loves you more than life itself. He doesn't deserve to be humiliated in front of his family. He started it, I said weakly. No, Helen said firmly. Gary made an observation, and you turned it into an attack on your husband. That's not the woman David married. My mother, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. Evelyn's under a lot of stress at work. She doesn't mean half of what she says. But even my own mother's defense sounded half-hearted. I found David outside on the back porch, staring at the garden we'd planted together 3 years ago. The roses were in full bloom, their red petals bright against the evening light. I'm sorry, I said, sitting down beside him on the porch swing. Are you? He asked without looking at me. Or are you just sorry you said it in front of everyone? I didn't have a good answer for that. Is it true? He asked. Am I boring? David, because if I'm making you miserable, then maybe we need to talk about what that means for us. The quiet certainty in his voice scared me more than if he'd yelled. This wasn't the David I knew, the one who always apologized first, who always tried to smooth things over. I didn't mean it the way it sounded, I said. How did you mean it? I struggled to find words that wouldn't make things worse. I just meant that we've gotten into a rut. We don't talk like we used to. We don't do things together anymore. And Jake does those things with you? The question was a trap, and we both knew it. He's a friend, David. That's all. David finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Doubt. Not about himself, but about me. Okay, he said simply. Okay. If you say he's just a friend, then I believe you. But I could tell he didn't, not really. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure I believed it myself anymore. The following Monday at work, I was reviewing employee files when my coworker Jennifer knocked on my office door. Hey, can I ask you something? She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Is everything okay with you and David? My stomach dropped. Why would you ask that? Well, my friend Lisa was at Romano's last week, and she saw you there with some guy. She said you two looked pretty close. I forced a laugh. That was Jake, my college friend. We were just catching up. Oh, Jennifer looked relieved. Lisa thought maybe you were having an affair or something. I told her that was ridiculous. You're not the type. No, I agreed. I'm definitely not the type. But as Jennifer left, I felt a chill run down my spine. If people were starting to notice, starting to talk, it was only a matter of time before the rumors reached David. I pulled out my phone and texted Jake. We need to be more careful. People are starting to notice. He replied immediately. Notice what? We're not doing anything wrong. You know what I mean. Actually, I don't. Are you ashamed to be seen with me? I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Was I ashamed, or was I just scared of what people might think, what David might think? We should probably not meet in public for a while, I typed back. So now you want to sneak around? That sounds like affair behavior to me. It's not an affair. Then why are you acting like it is? I didn't have an answer for that either. That evening, I was helping Lily with her math homework when I noticed David working on his laptop at the kitchen table. He'd been spending more time on the computer lately, staying up after I went to bed. "What are you working on?" I asked. "Just updating my gradebook," he said without looking up, but when I glanced over his shoulder, I could see he had multiple browser tabs open, and one of them looked like our cell phone account page. "Since when do you check the phone bill online?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. David closed the laptop. "Since I started wondering why our bill has been so high lately." My mouth went dry. "High how?" "Lots of texts and calls to the same number. A number that's not in your contacts under any name I recognize." I felt like the walls were closing in. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" David's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "The number belongs to Jake Morrison. I looked it up." "So?" "I told you we've been talking. He's going through a hard time." "Every day, Evelyn. Sometimes multiple times a day. And a lot of the calls are pretty long for someone who's just being supportive." I wanted to lie, to come up with another excuse, but my mind was blank. "I don't understand why you're checking up on me like I'm a criminal." "I'm not checking up on you. I'm trying to understand why my wife is more interested in talking to another man than she is in talking to me." "That's not true." "Isn't it? When's the last time you asked me about my day? When's the last time you seemed genuinely interested in anything I had to say?" I opened my mouth to argue, but realized I couldn't remember. When had I stopped caring about David's life, his thoughts, his feelings? "I care about you," I said weakly. "Do you?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you're already halfway out the door." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while David slept beside me, or pretended to sleep. I could tell by his breathing that he was awake too. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Can't sleep. Thinking about you." I glanced at David, then carefully typed back, "Same here." I meant what I said at the cafe. "I love you, Evelyn. I know the timing is complicated, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel this way." My heart raced as I read his words. "I know. Do you feel the same way?" I stared at the question for a long time before typing, "I don't know. Maybe. This is all so confusing." "It doesn't have to be confusing. You're not happy in your marriage. I can make you happy." "It's not that simple. I have children, responsibilities." "I'm not asking you to abandon your children. I'm asking you to choose happiness over settling." I was about to respond when David rolled over and opened his eyes. "Who are you texting at midnight?" he asked. I quickly closed the phone. "Nobody, just checking the time." David sat up and turned on the bedside lamp. "Let me see your phone." "What?" "No, that's ridiculous." "If it's nobody, then you won't mind showing me." "I mind because it's an invasion of privacy. Married couples are allowed to have private conversations. With other men, at midnight." I clutched the phone to my chest. "I'm not having this conversation." "Yes, you are." David's voice was firmer than I'd ever heard it. "Either you show me what's on that phone, or I'm going to assume the worst." "Fine, assume the worst. I don't care." But I did care, and we both knew it. David stared at me for a long moment, then got out of bed. "Where are you going?" "To sleep in the guest room. I can't lie here wondering who my wife is really thinking about." After he left, I sat alone in our bed, holding my phone like it was a lifeline. Jake had sent another message. "Are you okay? You stopped responding." "David's suspicious," I typed back. "This is getting complicated." "Only because you're making it complicated. Just tell him the truth, that you've fallen in love with someone else." I stared at those words, fallen in love with someone else, and felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. Was that what had happened? Had I fallen in love with Jake? And if I had, what was I going to do about it? The next few weeks passed in a haze of tension, and carefully avoided conversations. David slept in the guest room, claiming he had been staying up too late grading papers and didn't want to disturb me. We maintained a polite facade for the children, but I could see the confusion in their eyes. "Is Daddy sick?" Thomas asked one morning as I made his lunch. "Why would you think that, sweetie?" "He looks sad all the time, and he doesn't laugh at my jokes anymore." I knelt down to his level. "Daddy's just stressed about work. He still thinks you're funny." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. David had become a ghost in his own house, present but not really there. Meanwhile, my relationship with Jake had intensified. We couldn't meet in public anymore, so we'd started talking on the phone during my lunch breaks, long conversations that left me feeling more alive than I had in years. "I've been thinking," Jake said during one of these calls, "maybe it's time you made a choice." "What kind of choice?" "You know what kind. You can't keep living in limbo forever. It's not fair to David, and it's not fair to me. I need more time." "How much more time?" "It's been months, Evelyn. Either you want to be with me or you don't." The pressure in his voice scared me. "It's not that simple." "It is that simple. You're just afraid to admit it." Maybe he was right. Maybe I was afraid. Afraid of destroying my family, afraid of starting over, afraid of choosing passion over security. That weekend, we had Lily's 9th birthday party at the house. Both families came, along with several of Lily's friends and their parents. I was in the kitchen cutting cake when Gary cornered me. "So, how's your grieving friend doing?" he asked with a smirk. "What?" "Jake. The one whose father died. Except I did some digging, and his father is very much alive. Posted on Facebook just yesterday about his golf game." My blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Come on, Evelyn. We're not stupid. You're having an affair." "That's ridiculous." "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it's pretty obvious. The secret phone calls, the lies, the way you've been treating David like garbage." "You don't know anything about my marriage." "I know my brother deserves better than a wife who's cheating on him." "I'm not cheating," I hissed, glancing around to make sure no one could hear us. "Maybe not physically, but emotionally. You checked out of this marriage months ago." Before I could respond, David walked into the kitchen. "Everything okay in here?" Gary looked at me, then at David. "Just chatting with your lovely wife about her friend Jake." David's face went pale. "Gary, not here, not today." "When then? When are you going to stop pretending everything's fine?" "That's enough," David said firmly. "This is Lily's birthday. Can we please just focus on that?" Gary held up his hands. "Sure, but this conversation isn't over." After he left, David and I stood alone in the kitchen, the weight of unspoken accusations hanging between us. "We need to talk," David said quietly. "Not now. We have guests." "When? You've been avoiding me for weeks." "I haven't been avoiding you." "Haven't you? You leave for work early, you stay late, and when you are home, you're either on your phone or finding reasons to be in another room." He was right, and we both knew it. "Fine. We'll talk after everyone leaves." But after everyone left, after the dishes were done and the children were in bed, I found myself making excuses again. "I'm exhausted," I said. "Can we do this tomorrow?" "No." David's voice was sharp. "We're doing this now." He led me into the living room and closed the door. When he turned to face me, I saw something in his expression that made my stomach drop. Not anger, but resignation. "I know about Jake," he said simply. "Know what about Jake?" "I know you're in love with him. I know you've been having an emotional affair for months. I know you've been lying to me about where you go, who you talk to, what you're thinking about." I felt like I was falling down a deep, dark hole. "David, I'm not stupid, Evelyn. I see the way your face lights up when your phone buzzes. I see the way you smile when you're texting him. You haven't looked at me that way in years. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time you told me you loved me without me saying it first? When's the last time you seemed happy to see me walk through the door?" I couldn't answer, because I couldn't remember. I've been trying to figure out what I did wrong, David continued. What I could have done differently to keep you from falling for someone else. But I realize that's the wrong question. What's the right question? The right question is, do you want to fight for this marriage, or are you already gone? I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and saw 15 years of shared history in his eyes. Our first date, our wedding day, the births of our children, thousands of small moments that had built the foundation of our life together. But I also saw Jake's face, heard his voice telling me I deserved more, deserved passion and excitement and someone who truly understood me. I don't know, I whispered. David nodded like he'd expected that answer. Then I think you should go stay with your mother for a while. Give yourself some space to figure out what you really want. You're kicking me out. I'm giving you what you seem to want, freedom to make a choice without feeling trapped by obligation. What about the kids? They'll stay with me during the week. You can see them on weekends. The reality of what was happening hit me like a physical blow. David, please, let's not do anything drastic. Drastic? Evelyn, you've been emotionally checked out of this marriage for months. I'm just acknowledging what's already happened. I wanted to argue, to fight, to tell him he was wrong. But the truth was, he wasn't wrong. I had been checked out. I had been thinking about Jake more than I thought about my own husband. I need to pack some things, I said finally. David nodded. I'll tell the kids you're going to help Grandma with some projects for a few days. As I packed a suitcase with shaking hands, I kept waiting for David to change his mind, to beg me to stay, to fight for our marriage, the way Jake had been fighting for me. But he didn't. He just sat on the bed, watching me fold clothes with the same quiet resignation he'd shown all evening. For what it's worth, he said as I zipped up the suitcase, I hope he makes you happy. I hope this is all worth what you're giving up. I wanted to tell him it wasn't about giving anything up. It was about choosing something better. But looking at his broken expression, I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Instead, I kissed Lily and Thomas goodbye while they slept, their innocent faces peaceful in the dim light of their bedrooms. They had no idea their world was about to change forever. As I drove to my mother's house, I called Jake. I did it, I said when he answered. I left David. There was silence on the other end of the line. Jake, did you hear me? I heard you, Are you sure this is what you want? You've been pushing me to make a choice for months. Well, I made it. I chose you. Evelyn, I think we should talk, in person. Something in his tone made my stomach clench. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I just think we should take this slow, make sure we're both making the right decision. Take it slow. Jake, I just left my husband for you. I know, and I'm grateful, but what? Another long pause. But maybe we should make sure this is real before you blow up your entire life. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking. Are you having second thoughts? I'm just saying that fantasy and reality are two different things. When it was forbidden, when we were sneaking around, it felt exciting. But now that it's real, what? Now I'm scared I've ruined your life for something that might not work out. I sat in my car on the side of the road, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage, and realized that the man I'd given up everything for was already backing away. Jake, please don't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just being honest about my fears. Your fears? What about my fears? What about what I just sacrificed? Nobody asked you to sacrifice anything. The casual cruelty of that statement took my breath away. You've been telling me for months that I deserved better, that you loved me, that you'd wait forever for me. I meant all of that, but I never asked you to leave David. You didn't have to ask. It's what you wanted. What I wanted was for you to be happy. If leaving David makes you happy, then I'm glad you did it, but don't put that decision on me. I hung up the phone and sat in the dark, finally understanding the magnitude of what I'd done. I destroyed my marriage for a fantasy, sacrificed my family for a man who was already having second thoughts, and there was no way to take it back. I spent 3 weeks at my mother's house, living in my childhood bedroom like a teenager who'd been grounded. Mum tried to be supportive, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes every time she looked at me. "Maybe you should call David," she suggested one morning over coffee. "See if you two can work things out." "He doesn't want to work things out. He kicked me out, remember?" "He gave you space to think. There's a difference." But I was too proud to admit I'd made a mistake, too embarrassed to face the reality of what I'd done. Instead, I threw myself into work, staying late every night and avoiding the pitying looks from my co-workers who'd heard through the office grapevine that I was separated. Jake and I had spoken a few more times, awkward conversations where we both danced around the obvious truth that whatever we thought we had wasn't strong enough to survive in the real world. He'd started dating someone else, a fact I learned from his social media posts that felt like knives in my chest. "I thought you said you loved me," I'd texted him after seeing a photo of him with a blonde woman at a restaurant. "I do love you," he'd replied, "but love isn't always enough." It was the kind of meaningless platitude that David would never have given me. David would have been honest, even if the truth hurt. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. I signed for them with numb fingers, staring at the legal language that reduced 15 years of marriage to a series of asset divisions and custody arrangements. David was asking for primary custody of the children, citing my abandonment of the family home. He wanted the house, the cars, most of our savings. He was offering me weekend visitation and enough money to get an apartment. The papers also included something I hadn't expected, a thick folder labeled Evidence. Inside were printed copies of text messages between Jake and me going back months, screenshots of our phone calls, photos of us at the cafe, taken from someone's cell phone across the street, bank statements showing purchases I'd made, gifts for Jake, dinners at restaurants David and I never went to. David had been building a case against me, methodically documenting every lie, every betrayal, every moment I'd chosen Jake over my family. The evidence was damning and thorough, painting a picture of a woman who'd systematically destroyed her marriage while playing the victim. At the bottom of the folder was a handwritten note. "I gave you every opportunity to tell me the truth. You chose lies instead. Now we'll let the lawyers sort out the rest." I called David immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed his number. "Hello, Evelyn." His voice was calm, professional. "David, we need to talk about these papers." "What's to talk about? You made your choice. These are the consequences." "You can't take my children away from me." "I'm not taking them away. I'm providing them with a stable home environment with the parent who didn't abandon them." "I didn't abandon them. You kicked me out." "I gave you space to decide what you wanted. You decided you wanted Jake more than you wanted your family." "That's not true." "Isn't it? Because according to these text messages, you told him you loved him. You made plans to be together. You complained about how boring and neglectful I was." I closed my eyes, remembering those conversations, those moments when I'd felt so justified in my anger and resentment. "I was confused," I said weakly. "You were having an affair, an emotional affair, but an affair nonetheless, and now you want to pretend it didn't happen so you can keep the life you tried to throw away." "I made a mistake." "You made a series of choices, Evelyn. Every lie you told, every secret meeting, every time you chose to confide in him instead of me, those were choices." "So that's it. 15 years of marriage means nothing to you." "It meant everything to me. That's why this hurts so much." I could hear the pain in his voice, the exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting a battle he couldn't win. "David, please, can't we try counseling? Can't we work through this?" "Work through what? You don't love me anymore." "Maybe you never really did." "That's not true. I do love you." "No, you don't. You love the security I provided, the life we built together, the idea of not having to start over. But you don't love me." The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow. When had I stopped loving David the person and started loving David the provider, the safe choice, the man who would never leave me? "I want to see my children," I said. "They're at school, but you can see them this weekend, as outlined in the custody agreement." "This weekend? David, I haven't seen them in 3 weeks." "Because you chose not to. I never prevented you from seeing them." He was right. I could have visited, could have called more often, could have made more of an effort. But I'd been too wrapped up in my own drama, too focused on my wounded pride. "I'm going to fight this," I said. "Fight what? The evidence? The facts? You can try, but it won't change what happened." After I hung up, I sat in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the remnants of my old life, and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I'd lost. I'd traded a man who loved me unconditionally for one who loved me only when it was convenient. I'd traded a stable home for my children for weekend visits and supervised custody exchanges. I'd traded 15 years of shared history for a fantasy that had crumbled the moment it became real. The worst part wasn't the divorce papers or the custody arrangement, or even the humiliation of having my affair documented in legal briefs. The worst part was the look I'd seen in Lily and Thomas's eyes when I'd finally visited them that weekend. Confusion, hurt, and a wariness that hadn't been there before. "Why don't you live with us anymore, Mummy?" Thomas had asked, and I'd had no answer that would make sense to a 5-year-old. "Sometimes grown-ups need to live in different places," I'd said lamely. "But why?" "Because Mummy made some bad choices," I'd finally admitted. 6 months later, I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment across town, working the same job, but coming home to silence instead of children's laughter. Jake had moved to another city with his new girlfriend, leaving me with nothing but the memory of what I'd thought we'd had. David had remarried, a kindergarten teacher named Susan, who was kind to my children and never made them feel like they had to choose sides. In the few interactions we'd had during custody exchanges, she'd been polite and respectful, everything I should have been and wasn't. "She's nice," Lily had told me during one of our weekend visits. "She doesn't try to replace you, but she makes Dad happy." I'd smiled and told her I was glad, but inside, I felt like I was dying. David had moved on, found someone who appreciated what he had to offer, someone who chose him every day instead of taking him for granted. I, meanwhile, was alone with my regrets and the growing realization that I'd destroyed the best thing in my life for the worst reason. Because I'd been bored. The final irony came a year later when I ran into Jake at a coffee shop downtown. He was with his girlfriend, now fiancée, and they looked happy in a way that Jake and I never had. Our relationship had been built on secrecy and stolen moments and the thrill of doing something forbidden. Without those elements, we'd had nothing. "Evelyn," he said, looking genuinely surprised to see me. "How are you?" "I'm fine," I lied. "Congratulations on your engagement." "Thank you. How are Lily and Thomas?" "They're good, growing up fast." We made small talk for a few minutes, but it was clear that whatever we'd once shared was completely dead. He was a stranger now, someone I'd once thought I loved but had never really known. As I walked back to my empty apartment, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. So certain I was smarter than everyone else. So convinced I deserved more than what I had. I'd been right about one thing. I had deserved more. I deserved a husband who loved me, children who trusted me, a family that was built on honesty and commitment. I'd had all of that, and I'd thrown it away for nothing. The divorce was finalized on a cold Tuesday in February. I signed the papers in a lawyer's office that smelled like coffee and disappointment, officially ending the marriage I'd spent months sabotaging. David wasn't there. He'd signed his papers the day before. But as I walked out of that office, I saw him across the street, helping Thomas out of his car seat while Lily ran ahead toward the ice cream shop they were visiting. He looked older, but happier, more at peace than I'd seen him in years. He'd found his way back to joy, while I was still lost in the wreckage I'd created. I wanted to cross the street, to tell him I was sorry, to explain that I finally understood what I'd lost, but I knew it was too late for apologies. Some mistakes can't be undone, some bridges can't be rebuilt. Instead, I got in my car and drove home to my empty apartment, where I spent the evening looking through photo albums from our marriage, remembering the woman I used to be and the life I used to have. I'd thought I was the victim in my own story, but I'd been the villain all along. And now I was living with the consequences of every choice I'd made, every lie I'd told, every moment I'd chosen fantasy over reality. The papers were signed, the marriage was over, and I was finally free to be as miserable as I deserved to be.